So thank you, everybody, and wanted to introduce the panel for today, but I'm just going to introduce Dawn. Dawn wrote this herself because it's very short, and it should be longer. It should go on to about 4 sides of this, but Dawn is President and CEO of the Sourcing Industry Group, or SIG, as we all call it. Hopefully some of you saw the presentation yesterday. I thought it was awesome. Dawn has over 25 years of leadership experience, with the past 20 years focused on sourcing and outsourcing industry. And she is a frequent speaker. I think we were just talking about how many events you've been to and you couldn't remember this year, but a frequent speaker, presenter, and writer. Dawn has been featured at global events and in numerous publications, magazines, videos, books. Catch her on YouTube.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to introduce you to the rest of our panel. And I'm just going to give you, I'm not going to read their very, very long cards. So we're going to go with the brief. But first, we're going to start off in the green. This is Sheri Spinks, Global Procurement Strategy at Primo Water Corporation. She's the only practitioner that's on this panel. So she's going to be bringing a unique view to the stage. And when we talk about change management and innovation, she's a dynamic transformational leader, certified procurement and supply chain management professional, and passionate advocate for supplier diversity and empowerment and advancement of women in business, which I love. So Sheri, welcome. Next to her is Amy Fong. Amy is a dear friend of mine. I've known her for, wow, probably 15 years or plus or more. She brings over 20 years of buy-side company consulting, advising experience. She was before joining Everest Group, she was an associate principal and program leader at the Hackett Group's Procurement and P2P advisory program. And now she leads Everest Group's sourcing and vendor management practice. She's also wicked smart. She is on my advisory board as well. So welcome, I'm glad you're here too, Amy.
Thank you, Dawn.
And Amanda is the Chief Wonder Officer, and I think that's the coolest title, at Wonder Services. She's worked in procurement for about 19 years, and she and the Global Wonder Services team bring decades of experience to all of their implementations, their consulting, all of their engagements, and she has a booth if you haven't had a chance to stop by and meet the Wonder team. And here's our Chief Wonder Officer. And Amanda, just so excited to see you again after all this time with COVID.
Yeah.
And excited to have you on the panel.
Thanks, Dawn.
So we are going to be talking about change management and innovation. And really what we want to focus on the change management side is more around the tech implementation and the change management that's required. Because, you know, I've always had the premise that if we build it, they will come. Until I got into procurement. And you can build the best thing in the world, but if they don't want to come on board with you, whether it's buying on contract or using your software, we're really just stuck. And we've wasted a lot of money and a lot of time doing that. So I'm going to start off, and I want you guys to just tell me, when you hear change management, I know it's been around for 30 years, people have been saying it, it's that nice, warm, fuzzy feeling that you need to get people to follow you along. Then corporate innovation. Can you tell me how they're different and how they go together? Why don't we start with you, Amy?
Sure. Those are both really broad terms that have very specific meanings, I think, within the procurement function. To me, change management is, innovation is kind of how you come up with the new ideas and the new things and the improvements. Change management is how you take everyone else along with you, right? And I think innovation is a very interesting term. We talk a lot about innovation in technology and innovating in our procurement processes, but I would be, leaving a huge piece of that out if we left out as procurement people. Innovation from our suppliers is equally important, and suppliers can help with, product innovation, but also process innovation and tech innovation, and bringing that all together. I see a huge difference in talking to organizations about their VMOs or their supplier management programs, and whether they are receptive to supplier ideas or not, and supplier innovation tends to be more of a cultural thing than a process thing. And that is a bit of a culture plus change management to get you there. So I think it's a huge topic, and it's loaded, and it's incredibly important for us to get to where we want to be.
I'm just going to add on to that a little bit. So we, thinking about these two topics, the first thing I thought of is without change, there's really no innovation, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of what we see all the time is that we'll have a great tech that's deployed or a great new idea that someone's trying to get adopted, but without that proper change management, people aren't coming along with it. So you'll have beautiful innovation along the way, but then you you don't get the results that you're looking for because you don't have that proper adoption from a user standpoint. So that's like the first thing that I thought of. Without change, you don't have innovation.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
So what do you think from an internal perspective?
From a practitioner perspective.
Practitioner, yes.
Yeah. Well, I think change management to me equals procurement. Like everything that we do in procurement is a form of change, right? We're either changing
Yes.
your process, your supplier, your spec, your product, or your service. And I think more so than ever, having that, the change management skills, the interpersonal skills, the relationship building skills is absolutely critical in procurement for you to be successful.
And yet, there wasn't a desired trait or competency
No.
20 years ago.
No.
Because you just did what you were told and you bought what you were told to buy. You placed orders. So dramatic change in that. So when we talk about change management in organizations, sometimes you inherit it because you were told to. And sometimes you lead it. So maybe, Amanda, start with you. What is the best way to have change management in an organization? Do you like it inherited or do you like it to grow?
Okay, so procurement kind of gets both of these worlds at times, right? So you'll get an ERP implementation that finance is driving forward and you just basically have to adopt it, or there's other things going on in the organization that's driving into procurement. However, we now have, 500 plus different procure techs out there. So there's a lot more of selection within the organization to drive that change forward because we have those options now. Obviously, we're all here at Arkestro's conference, so we know of one of many, but hopefully Arkestro's here in the room, so they're one of the best, right, to deploy. So but really, when it comes to change management, it's always harder when it's being done to you. Like, I even talk about this with my husband. I work in the change management field. I do not like when people tell me to change, right? It's always like, I will help other people change, but when it's told to me, I don't like it at all. So it's a bigger challenge, I think, when it comes to change management, when you're having something in procurement that's being told that you have to do versus being in the driver's seat and actually creating that change.
Okay, so Amy, what is your view on that?
What was the question?
So do you like it when people tell you to change if you have to
sorry.
inherit a change
I'm
management?
thinking about the driver's seat. So yeah, I think everyone's resistant to that, right? It's human nature. We all want to kind of chart our own path, and when you look at organizations, whether it's a procurement function or a company, every new leader comes in and they want to put in their own stamp, right? Here's my edict, or here's my strategy, and we're going to change. Often that's changing a lot. I think that makes it additionally difficult because people feel like they're jigging and they're jagging. At the same time, though, I've had this conversation of, like, with peers and analysts firms, well, 5 years ago we said this, and now we say the opposite, and now we say the opposite again. Like, why do these strategies keep going back and forth? And we kind of realized that there's value creation in that transition. So even though it seems like you're just changing your mind every 5 years, as you change and you transform, you're actually adding value to the organization in one way or another. So I think if you start to embrace it that way, that helps you kind of feel a little better about being, pulled back and forth in different directions. Convincing people of that is half the battle, right?
It is, and there's a lot
changing people's perspective.
There's a lot of change going on too.
There is.
So you have all these like Sheri, we were talking about this at lunch. Do you want to go through it? There's just a lot of change going on.
There's just so much all the time. The speed of change, and what we were talking about was one of the most difficult things that I see as a practitioner is you get the buy-in, you go through and you start making the change. Before you've even finished implementing it, there's something else on the horizon, or you need to tweak, the solution that you've worked so hard to put in play, and so that you start to lose trust, right? People get, okay, this is the new flavor of the month, and here we go again. So people are either, like half-heartedly saying, okay, yeah, I'm on board, but really, they're talking bad about it, in the bathroom or whatever it may be. So it's just everybody's saturated with so much all the time, and the constant change and speed of change and the barriers that we have in being able to keep the speed of implementation on the right pace.
Yeah, so when I first started off as a practitioner, and I'm a CPA, so the numbers should just tell you the story, and I'd come in with my spreadsheet and go like, see, that's why we need to make this change.
Yeah.
And people are like, I'm not making it. I said, but we can save all this money. And they're like, yeah, I'm not doing that. I don't want to do that. And I learned that a lot of people carry background noise, that there's a conversation they're having in their head that doesn't come out through their mouth. And we had to dig and ask question after question after question after question. Why do you feel that way? What else might impede progress? Why can't you get on board? What can we do to help you? What kind of safety net do you need? So from a practitioner standpoint, I found that you really have to become a people person and be able to read the person and get into their head. So tell me, what do you do? How do you approach change management in your organization?
Well, you hit it bang on, Dawn. I think one of the first things that I do when I enter a new organization or a new department, or there's new people coming on board in other departments, is I sit down and have let's talk about what success looks like. How do you like to work? This is how I work. How can I help you? What keeps you up at night? Getting at those pain points so that when you start to think of solutions that you want to bring on board, you can tune into the WIIFM, What's in it for me station, which is going to be different and targeted at each of your stakeholders, right? But if you've already got kind of the groundwork done to build that relationship, that they're going to be more receptive to listen to you. And you have to go and approach it to them as, I know that this causes you pain, and I know that change is hard, but here's why you want to get on board with this. This is the value that it's going to deliver for you. It can't be all about, well, procurement are going to do this, and it's going to deliver all these savings, to your point. It has to be, what is it going to do for you marketing, and for you finance, and for you operation? And if you can get at least one quick win, with either the decision maker within there. If you can't get at the decision maker, you get at the influencer, Amanda. She can talk some more about this, but you got to get some of those ambassadors and get some people on your side, and then you can start to really get some traction.
Yeah. So Amy, when we're talking about tech implementation, leadership styles need to be flexible. One day you're going to be charging up the hill on that white horse, with the flag saying, follow me, this is going to be great. And the next day you might be at the bottom of the hill pushing people up and providing them support and a safety net, because that's what they need. They're fatigued. So how do you coach people on, you can't just be the cheerleader all the time. You can't always just be the caregiver. You have to have a flexible style. So tell me, how do you approach that?
Yeah, I think that, I just to circle back a little bit to connect this to what Sheri was saying earlier, I think that one of the challenges, the bigger challenges we have in procurement is that to do any kind of tech implementation or really any change, we have so many people impacted that are not within our group. If you're in finance, if you're a CPA, no offense to CPAs, but
they're bean counters. We're bean counters.
They can change something, and the users are the other finance people, right? We have to deal with all the budget holders, all the end users, all the requisitioners in the company.
The suppliers.
Often all the suppliers.
Yes.
I'm not forgetting the suppliers. That's often the hardest, right?
Yes.
You have to get IT
Even
on
though
board.
you're paying them,
depending.
they're sometimes the hardest one. IT, right? So there's a lot of different people, and I think to really, that is part of leadership, right? Is figuring out the what's in it for me for all those different roles, adapting, really being attentive to the different needs of different types of suppliers, like calling out that your small suppliers are going to need a different solution than your big suppliers. And when I look at tech implementations over the last 10 or 15 years, I had a lot of data on this in my ACAT days, looking at like the percent of, say, even the P2P process that's automated. It's abysmal,
It is.
right? For the amount of money
Yes.
that's been spent on technology in this space, the percent of invoices that are automated, POs that are automated, suppliers that are on board, recs that are coming in electronically, those should be all at 100 really by now, right? It's 2022, but most companies, they're not even above 75%. And so I really believe that part of that is that people do, companies do 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 phases, and then, like Sheri said, they kind of get distracted. There's a new shiny object, and often a very important shiny object, and they move on, right? And they kind of just accept that 25% still haven't bought into this, right? So there's a lot of endurance, I think, besides just sort of adapting to different needs of different groups. There's endurance in sticking with the program, continuing to staff it, not taking your best people off and putting them on another program, because we've got to get better at implementing tech in this industry. It's really bad, you know, and I think there's a ton of amazing solutions out there, but if we're not optimizing them and getting the full value, then what are we even doing for our organizations?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and so Amanda, you know, when I did my first P2P implementation, it was probably 2000.
Right.
And year 2000, and we had a bunch of suppliers who didn't even have computers.
Right.
They didn't have
Yes,
computers.
right.
And we had to coach them on how to go to a public library to log in so they could be a registered supplier and get paid through the platform. So, I mean, so the change management was huge, and the onboarding and the user adoption was huge as a result of this. So tell me about the supplier struggle. How do you deal with suppliers and change management?
Okay, so first of all, when I was at MGM, and I can still say that, right? It was several years ago. We did a large implementation for P2P, and we had 15% email addresses. Everything else was fax. So I hear you. So we had to do a fax campaign out to all of the suppliers saying, hey, we have your fax number, but can we have your email address? Because we're going to the system and we need to email you the POs and register you for the supplier portal, the whole bit. And so it was a real struggle. So something that we've at Wonder Service, what all of my background and what we've learned from our clients is that supplier enablement is so critical, right, for the success of a lot of these different technologies out there. And one of the things that we use internally and externally is this whole concept of filling the void. Okay, so whenever you go through a change, immediately you start thinking about how it's going to impact you, and you're forming your own reality, whether it's real or not. And this happens all the time internally too. When people hear the word automation, what do they think? They think, I am going to be out of a job.
Elimination.
My job.
Right? Or my job is going to be completely different. So the challenge of anyone leading change is to fill the void with the right thoughts as soon as possible. You might not get everyone bought in, but you don't want to leave that lingering, because then what happens is Dawn is, I'm just going to use you as an example, is struggling with this. She's made up her own reality, and now she's going to talk to Sheri. Now it's also Sheri's reality, and it goes like wildfire versus being proactive and trying to fill that void as soon as possible. You can do that with suppliers too, because suppliers get nervous about any change you do. They don't want to lose their business. They don't want to have an impact to their relationship. So the more you can talk about, here is what is changing around our expectations with the supplier, but here's what's not changing, because that is a void filler, right? You can fill information to say, hey, you know what? Our relationship is not going to change. I am still going to be working with you the way I used to. It's just going to be a different way of transacting with each other. So the more that we can talk about what's going to change, what's not going to change, is a great way to do that as you're interacting both internally and externally with the suppliers.
Yeah, and Sheri, you know, smart people don't want to do dumb work. You know, it's just the
Right.
truth. I mean, if you have to go into work and it's brain numbing and you're doing the same boring routine, you know, you're standing at 1 foot off the ground instead of 40,000 feet and not even being able to think strategically, you're never going to get your organization to be innovative and really want to change. So how do you address that automation for that regard is freeing you up to do more strategic work? Does that resonate with people as a practitioner?
100%. I mean, I try to. I'm so sorry. I try to have those conversations regularly with team members. Say, okay, here's where you're at today. We've had a conversation about where you want to go. And to your point, don't you want to come in and do something fun? Don't you want to be challenged? Don't you want to not know exactly what you're going to do when you come into work the next day? So I think it's a huge sell for most people. But we also have to recognize your audience, right? It's just like when we were talking about finding the benefit for your stakeholders. There are some people that actually do like that.
Yeah, well, there are, and that's
Yeah,
why
there are.
there are people that are probably always going to stay in transactional purchasing.
Right.
They're never going to be called strategic, and they're never going to be doing sourcing. So, and bless their heart for wanting to do that, and hopefully they'll retire out of the system because we're going to automate all that boring work.
Yeah.
Yes,
This
we
was
are.
actually, this kind of came up in the last panel that was up here for anyone who was in here on the talent panel, because Dan Core was talking about the same thing, how, you know, young people come into these roles, and at home we do everything automated. I haven't walked into a bank in 20 years,
Right.
you know? I don't do anything like on paper anymore. It's all electronic. My bills are paid, whatever, you know? Everything's very, you know, app-based or online-based. and then they come to a business and it's like, wait, where's the technology? Like, why am I doing it this way,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
So part of keeping the newer talent is, I think, implementing this. Like, I think that mindset is completely changing, and you're right. I hate to say retire out, but that is sort of how things work out in the
Well,
end.
they'll attrite one way or the other through death
Yeah.
or retirement. So retiring is a nicer way of saying it because they need to get out of the workforce.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's
So-
surprising though, sorry, I was gonna say, like, there's a lot of large companies that on the outside, you know, you assume that they have a lot of this automation, right? And it's shocking once you get inside.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
And
we all
see that
see
it's,
that.
you know,
Yeah.
it's held together with, you know, paper clips and tape and
Well, I talked to
some of the
a
manual
woman-
processes that are
Yeah,
still.
I just talked to someone over there that was in the hall, and she said when she was interviewed, they said, are you used to using green screens? And she just laughed, like, yeah, sure, thinking it was a joke. She got to work, and they said, here's your terminal, F12 does this, F3. It was a DOS-based
Exactly right.
system
Wow.
that they are
right.
still using. And their founder is 70 years old and doesn't want to change and doesn't want technology. And they're struggling to try and be as strategic as they can, but they have a DOS screen, like for real, like in today's day. And she said, I walked in, I almost died. Like I thought it was a joke when they interviewed me. So there are companies that don't want to change. I still know a CPO that will not. He dictates his emails still. He won't type them. That person doesn't have the mindset we need. So the change is coming at us fast, and it's only going to get faster.
Yeah.
I've had
And
So one thing on this topic though, because in my experience, so many people forget this. We get very focused on the tech, right? And then we tell our people, you're not going to be transactional anymore, you're going to be strategic. Strategic, right? But we never define what that is. Like, people really struggle to define what exactly does that look like. And then what we do is we implement the technology, but then we're not upskilling our people. It's a hard transition from doing something transactionally every day. First of all, to Sheri's point, not everyone wants to make that move. But if they do want to make the move, it's a very different expectation and role within organizations. So we always like to use the mantra, people first. Like, yes, it's a technology, but if you don't make that transition with your people, you're not going to get the results that you want.
Well, that's part of being a good leader, is giving them the support, which means the training, so that they can make that journey across that chasm that is scaring them to death, that they're going to fall off and die, as a result of it. So when you talk from a practitioner standpoint, how do you deal with your suppliers to get them to want to come on board?
Get them on board with new innovation and technology.
It's going to make their life easier, better.
Yeah, 100%. I think it depends. I go back to the relationship, right? There's some suppliers that if you've built and maintained the right relationships, and depending, let's be honest, how much you spend with these suppliers, right? Sometimes they're going to, okay, you say jump, they're going to say how high. But I think if you develop that relationship, they're going to come on board. But we have to try to, be also empathetic to their position, because I think we were talking about it at lunch, like the amount of portals and systems and invites that our suppliers get now on a daily basis. Like, I can't even imagine the fatigue that they have from that. So I think I go back to what's the benefit to them, right? How is this technology? Hopefully it's going to make their life easier. Hopefully when you have the conversation with them, the voice of supplier to say, what's it like to do business with us today? They're likely going to talk about how your administrative processes are a pain in the ass for them, and they can't talk to the right people, and you don't pay us on time. And hopefully, these new solutions that you're putting in place are going to address some of those pain points, and so that's how you can sell them on it.
We have one procure-to-pay company that we build, and it took 9 months to make it through their system. So for a small company like ours, that was painful. And yet it was automated. And it took 9 months to get paid.
So I had so it was on the other side though, I got a 14-page supplier onboarding form. And I was like, you know what, I'm just not gonna do business with you, because I'm a small company, right? And so I was like, this is ridiculous, you guys need to figure this out. If you wanna work with me, then we'll have a different conversation, but I'm not going through a 14-page, like seriously, 14 pages of scrolling on a registration form. It was not the welcome and relationship that I was looking for.
It's funny, I was gonna say that earlier, because I figured we've all had that experience, right? Where you're working with a procurement organization, you're helping them to become more effective and more efficient, and then, it takes you 3 months to onboard as a supplier, and then it takes you, forever to get the PO and the contract, and then they can't pay the invoice, and like these aren't even big jobs. These are like small, under $100,000 type items. And I mean, I've gone to CPOs and been like, I just want you to know that like your process might be a little more broken than you think it is.
Here's the results.
This is really
real life
and
example.
this isn't even like high risk spend.
Right.
You really need to look at it, and that's more common than I think people realize. And these are with big companies, as you were saying.
Yeah. One other thing that I wanted to mention about onboarding suppliers. Whenever we have a situation where we're onboarding whatever group of people, it's always good to have someone from that group of people communicating to the broader group of people. So we've actually brought in for some of our clients some of their key suppliers who have been on the technology before, that they can speak to it and the benefits that they've received from it. And then we'll do videos, we'll do other things with them, and then send that out to the rest of the supply base.
Like testimonials.
Yeah, testimonial, because they want to hear it. They don't want to hear it. I mean, they'll take your word for it, but it might be the change of the day, right?
Yep.
If they can hear it from another supplier who's in their shoes, it goes over a lot better at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the quantitative and qualitative must-haves in a change management program. So we're talking about technology, we're talking about people.
Yeah.
So what's a must-have to any of you?
I think you have to, as far as success metrics go, you have to build in some metrics around the people side of it, right? So as Amanda was saying, that you just focus on tech and it's all about those KPIs. So I don't know exactly what those look like. It's probably going to differ depending on what it is that you're implementing and the culture within your organization. But things around engagement levels, how often are you having outreach sessions and training sessions? If you can somehow measure excitement about the tool, right, within your own teams and across the organization. Attendance for, things that you are offering, and what do those things look like? Because everyone's going to have, your standard KPIs around, does it deliver what it said it was going to? But I think it's really important to focus on that people side as well.
So another must-have?
Yes. Sorry. I'm so excited about this. I have so much experience on this. So, first of all, you have to define that future state, right? And so often we'll get into an organization and I'll ask the question, why are you doing this? And then they will pull up their business case and they'll be like, this ROI. And I was like, well, that's cool and all, but when you're going to explain it to your people and to your suppliers, why are you doing this? And we'll get qualitative and quantitative. We push for that because we need to have the descriptors of the change, but we also need to paint the picture for those CPAs in the world that want numbers.
Right.
We need to paint the picture on the number side. So it's critically important as you're going out there and doing your change management activities that you're not talking ROI, but you're talking about the future state and those success metrics for the people that are being impacted by the change. And that's a big thing too, like a must-have in my mind, is we in procurement, I did a project a while ago where, and I can still say I'm in procurement, right? Because I sat in the seat.
We'll
Yeah,
let you.
sure. We did a whole revamp of someone's training program for a recent P2P deployment. And the training didn't go so well the first time around. And when I looked at the presentation, I was like, I know exactly why it didn't go well. It was because we used all of our own language in the presentation. So we were talking about P2P and rec to PO and all these other things that we like to talk about in procurement, and it had nothing to do with the end user. Even the benefits, all the benefits were for procurement. And I was like, well, of course, people probably didn't care then because it wasn't about them, it was about somebody else. So we revamped the entire thing to always make it about them, right? So when you're asking for more resources internally, we hit on this at a different session earlier, but when you're asking for resources, it's not your problem. You don't need the resources. Somebody else in the organization needs you to have those resources. You see the difference? So that's a must-have within change management, is to stop talking about our stuff and talking about their needs.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I think that's a really, really good
Yeah.
point. So Amy, can you expand on that at all?
Yeah, so I was actually going to give the same thing. I think having a vision, no, I mean, I agree with you. Like having a vision of where we're going and being able to articulate it and visualize it and show it in a few different ways, right?
But that is the key part,
Yes.
because you're selling up the organization, across the organization, and down.
Yes.
And externally sometimes,
externally.
a lot of the
Yes.
time in our
And sometimes
roles.
even
Yeah.
the regulators that you
Yeah,
have to
yes,
convince.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
it
And
can get
I
much more complicated.
I think that articulation is really important. If you have someone rolling it out who, A, doesn't really believe in that, or B, doesn't speak the language of the people they're speaking with, then they need help, right? They need other people involved, intervening or translating that and being part of the process. And I think in some organizations, just getting the sort of leadership team on board, the people who are rolling it out all on the same page is half the battle to be able to get there.
Yeah.
I think part of that resource ask from the business, to Amanda's point, it's not procurement, but also can we get some project management resources? Because I don't know about you guys, but I'm still facing it all the time where you've got these major transformational projects and they're expecting people to just kind of carve out 10 to 15% of your time and do it off the side of your desk and keep doing your day job and moving things forward. And I think it's a huge gap that we have today, and it's a reason why a lot of things fail.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the things that I've seen in the last several years, maybe 5 years, that's become more common is that procurement organizations will carve out a center of excellence, a COE, a transformation team, whatever, that looks across. They don't expect the category managers, the sourcing managers to roll out the tech. They have someone who's doing that, who's, kind of supporting them across all those categories and across the team, and can really focus on it. And ideally, that person has the project management skills to manage a program that's most likely going to be millions of dollars over several years.
Yeah.
Highly
And it was
cross-functional.
underestimated.
A group of people too, like the COEs are so excellent because they can also think about the groups of people that are going to be impacted and really give some thought to it, because not only do you have all those different groups of people, they all consume information differently. So as you're going out there with a combination, because people get really email heavy, but why don't we do some videos? Why don't we do some infographics? Let's have a website. Let's do all of these other things, because you have to meet people where they're at, right? You have to know what's influencing them and what motivates them, but you also have to meet them where they're going to want to consume the information.
Yeah.
Which is I think something that it was like a light bulb moment for me several years ago. I was like, oh yeah, it has to be multifaceted to be able to be effective.
Yeah, so I want to tell you a story about a sourcing team that I worked with, and I was a consultant at the time. And so this was an electric utility, and I had a lineman foreman was going to be our team leader. He was already named by the executive branch because he was really well respected out in the field, and we were going to make a lot of field changes. And he missed the first meeting. So second meeting he came in, I walked in and I saw this towering man, and I said, "You must be Wayne." I put my hand out, and he said, "Yeah, and you're the bitch that's here to get rid of my Western red cedar." So,
It's a great start.
Hello.
yeah, and so I said, "No, I'm the bitch that's going to help you study it, and we're going to make the best choice for the company." So, as I was quaking, because he was probably 6'5", but because we brought him along and kept him by keeping our enemy close, he became At the very end, he said, "I guess I just like the smell of Western red cedar. I don't need it as a species any longer. We can buy our utility poles in southern yellow pine. I give up. There's absolutely no reason we shouldn't be doing it." Then he became our spokesperson for sourcing around the company. And he would tell that story. He got chastised once by HR on using the bitch word every time he was got on stage. But
You bleep them out.
Old days, right?
yeah, but it was like the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And then you have a champion. So do you ever look for that naysayer to bring them in closer?
100%. Yeah, those are my favorite. I don't know, maybe it's the challenge. But I love winning. I love winning over naysayers, and they do absolutely become your biggest ambassadors, because the beauty of it is when they're bitching about it and they're really angry about it, everybody talks more about things that they don't like. So they've already made all of these connections internally and telling everybody about how awful it's going to be. So when you get them to make that switch, you've already got that audience already connected and ready to go.
Yeah.
So
We call them convert champions.
convert champions.
Okay.
Right? So we actually have Sheri was mentioning we have a matrix of what we call influencers within an organization. So if you guys are on social media, you know how influencers can change a lot of behavior within a community of people. So we've used that same methodology to create our influencer list. So we have standard influencers, strategic advisors, your convert champions need to be considered, your super user influencers, and your spokespeople of the project itself. So we actually spend a lot of time identifying who those people are, and then we create a buddy system. Right? So you get a buddy for those people, and that buddy is accountable for feeding the influencer the right information to be going across the company, or bringing that convert champion along so that they can be a champion. So we do a lot of work in that space. It's critically important to know who those people are and to activate them in the right ways across the organization.
I like that. I never thought about it, but you're right. They're influencers, good or bad. So you have to identify all of them and make sure you're working with all of them.
Yeah, in my early change management days, that was actually, we had an influencer matrix, right? Who were all the stakeholders, and are they supporters? Are they against it? Everybody matters, right? And you did have to plot that out and then kind of come up with a strategy for each. But I like your lingo better. It's more fun.
We try to make it fun.
So what lessons learned? So we've gone through a pandemic, and are you still working from home?
Yes, I work almost 100% remote because my company's headquartered out of Tampa and I'm based out of Toronto.
Yeah, that's not even close.
So,
That's hard to commute.
Yeah, it's not even close. So yeah, I've actually onboarded through 3 different organizations all during COVID, so all remote.
So tell me then, change management, I've always done it in person.
Yeah.
I've always had a tangible, face-to-face, human-to-human interaction with people. What is it like doing it over Zoom or however you're doing it these days with remote work?
Yeah, I think we've all gotten used to it, but some of the in-person skills still apply when you're on your Zoom videos or your team videos, right? So it's taking the time to connect with somebody as a human first, right? So try not to just jump on and dig right in. Sometimes that happens, but try to take the time out. It's just a couple of minutes to actually ask people how they're doing and get to know them and to know your audience, right? I think the speed, which we've touched on a lot, just everybody is so busy these days. So I think that's hard because when you start talking about change, people equate that to more work and they equate it to pain. And so, right, you have to delicately to bring it up in a way that you talk about all of the benefits first. And of course, there's going to be some work involved, but talk about the benefits first. I think from a procurement perspective, though, if COVID's taught us anything, it's that nothing is for certain. And the spotlight has finally been shone onto procurement. So people get it, right? You no longer have to explain what it is that you do. People get it. And that can work to our benefit if now that we're at the table, we do the right thing, right? You're going to grandma's house, what are you going to bring? So what are you going to bring to that table and how are you going to use that opportunity that you've been given? So I think in some ways it can be easier because at least the audience is there and the attention is there, but now the pressure's on, right? So be careful what you ask for. You're in that spotlight.
Yeah.
Be careful.
So what other advice can you give for remote?
So one thing that I've noticed is that for whatever reason, companies started migrating to less one-on-one conversations and more like, hey, we're going to have 5, 6, 7 more people on the phone. And I think or on a Zoom meeting. So I think there's power in making sure that we still have that one-on-one connection, even if it is via Zoom. Because what the valuable part of having those conversations is actually not what you're telling them. It's what you're hearing from them, right? The questions that they're asking, the facial expressions that they have, if they're checking their phone while you're trying to talk to them on Zoom. All that body language is a good indication of how they're coming along with the change or not coming along with the change. So as you're going out and you're doing your Zoom meetings, remember the one-on-one is really important and listening is more important on those calls than actually what you're communicating.
So active listening is what you're talking about.
Yes.
So Amy, maybe you can explain that to the audience, what that is and what it isn't.
Yeah, so active listening specifically, really, it is what it sounds like, right? But you can tell when someone's not doing it, right? It either is. To me, active listening is, you're kind of engaged, you're mirroring back what people are saying, you're validating that you understood what they said, and really hearing them. For me, that usually means I'm taking notes while I'm listening to them, especially if I'm not face-to-face, because it helps me focus on hearing them, translating it, and then after kind of mirroring it back and capturing that, and not just walking away from the conversation. I think that's really important, especially in these virtual situations where it's easy to miss them.
But if someone else is not actively listening to you, they're just thinking about the next thing they're going to say or the next
yeah.
but. Is there a way that we can coach that person? Because they're not listening. It's
Yeah.
obvious because they're coming up with their rebuttal to you. And but are the favorite two words to say to procurement. Yeah, but we're different. Yeah, but you don't understand.
right.
Yeah, but it can't work this category.
I think you have to lean into that. You have to listen, ask more questions. Why? Tell me why you're different. And there are things that are different, and we need to understand those, and we need to adapt, right? We need to adapt the technology. We have, PO flip on a mobile phone for the suppliers that don't have, a computer, right? Like those technologies are there, and those adaptations are there, and it's important to listen to those things. So I think part of us rolling this out is picking that up. In my experience remote, I was working from home for 10 years before COVID, right? So I was well seasoned in that, but I made a point to see my team, both my peers and the team that reported to me and the people above me, every probably quarter or at least a couple times a year, because I felt like once you meet someone face to face, you pick up all these cues that you're much better able to work. And this was phone, not video back then, right? But you're still much, you just mesh a little bit better, right? And it's funny, we're on video now. I've been at my firm for 3 years. I had never met my team in India, and I just went over about a month ago. And although most of the people there I had seen on video many times, everybody looked different in 3D. I had no idea their heights. I did not recognize people I had had 20 calls with on video. And there was a completely different vibe in terms of picking up people's mannerisms and cues and being able to have that conversation where you're both engaging, you're understanding, you're picking up what that person is saying, and they're listening and vice versa. So I think that we have to be really careful in the remote and the hybrid world to still invest on those offsites or those travel, the trips, the face-to-face meetings, even if it's just we go to a conference together. I don't think that we can do this 100% virtual, although I'm a big supporter of work from home.
No,
That's really subtle.
We're getting the walk-in.
Yeah, it's like, what?
That's cutting me off.
I'm we have 3 minutes left.
Okay.
Do you want to put it out to?
Yeah, is there anything you'd want to ask? Because I'm just having a time of my life just chatting with
talk
some
all day,
friends.
We'll leave it till
This
the
is open
show.
to you. Don't look around at other people.
Questions. Well, while we're making people come up with a question,
what-
on your note thing, just when we're talking about virtual, it's also important to tell people that I'm taking notes so that it doesn't look like you're disengaged.
Yes.
But also,
Yes.
to your question, Dawn, about how do we coach people, it makes people feel bad. Like if they're one of the type of people that aren't really listening, when you say, I'm just, I am paying attention, I just want to make sure I capture everything you're saying, and I'm taking notes, it makes them think twice about how they should be acting.
That's totally.
That is true. It does
so
make you
true.
think twice.
So true. And I think there's a T-shirt, a Yeah But T-shirt that I think we need to make.
We do. A yeah, but.
A Yeah
That's
But.
brilliant.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I always love this conversation about transformation because I wonder what the role of technology is. Everybody that's got one of these has undergone more change management than we've ever done in procurement. We bank, we shop, we travel, we do everything with one of these. We never had any training. We never needed to be persuaded why it was a better thing to do. We just used it, tried it, liked it, did it. So what do you think is the role of tech in alleviating the problem, as you've described, of change management in organizations?
Oh, should we go there?
I know.
go
That
there?
could be another hour and a half.
We got 2 minutes,
Ease of
22
use,
seconds
right?
to
Like
say
it's a great example, but it's so easy. It's so easy. That's what it is. So I think the role of tech is to, keep it user experience centric and make it an enjoyable, easy experience.
So
Yeah.
I'm actually gonna take a really hard line on this, I think. I think most of our procure tech has sucked.
Yeah, it
Okay?
has.
Flat out has sucked.
Until now.
Until now.
Until now, yeah.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
And like even what we heard this morning from Edmund around, hey, this technology should work without a user even needing to use it. I was like, that is so brilliant, so brilliant. So we've been really behind on the tech itself. But another thing that I want to point out is that I think the way that we're implementing the technology is wrong too. Okay, so 70% of procure tech implementations right now, and studies change, but 65 to 70% fail. Okay, and it's because of lack of user adoption. So to me, like the reason why I'm a chief wonder officer is I'm always wondering, like, and have that curiosity around, why is that? Are we just going into that same brick wall over and over and over and over again, right? So I challenge you guys, like we have to think differently about how we're implementing the technologies too. I always like to say it has to be people focused first, user experience focused first, and the technology will come along, hopefully. We're seeing that now, but it really, we've early days, it was always like the tech comes first and the tech is gonna save the world, and we forgot about our people.
And this has been over 20 years to
Yeah.
get to where
Yes.
we are
We
today.
started
Yes.
being integration focused, ERP, right?
Yes.
Feature
Yeah.
function focused, which is nice, and then finally we're getting to user focus. People stop buying tech that's hard to use. Like, it should be user first, customer first, stakeholder first.
Yes.
And if it's not, then tell the tech companies. Like, they're getting better, but they're not all there yet. And I think we have to kind of draw a hard line and prioritize.
Yeah.
So I
Put
was
our money
given
there.
the shut up,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
shut up
The
line.
zero.
I did that so subtly.
That was real subtle. It was stop now. Yeah. So thank you all for your time. I hope you enjoyed some of the conversation, got something out of it with us. So thank you, ladies.
Welcome.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thanks, Dawn.
Thank you.